Hi, welcome back. We're nearing the end. Today's discussion is on Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham jail. We'll also talk a little bit about argumentative nonfiction writing, which this is an example of, a little bit different from the more creative nonfiction we uh, we will see, especially in Tim O'Brien, but also in yesterday's reading by Orwell. Okay, so this one starts page 529 in your app carrion. I've included in your email a link to the text this was in response to. This is in 1963, so King has been working on civil rights on a national level for about 8 years since the initial Birmingham riots in '55 in Montgomery. And he at this point is jailed when he writes this. He's jailed because the local courts pass a don't parade, no parades, no essentially civil rights movement events when he comes to town. And he is imprisoned in Birmingham jail for disobeying this, for leading the parade after all. The conditions are bad in Birmingham jail, and he's smuggled in a newspaper on which he uses little scraps of the newspaper to write this entire and fairly substantial, as you notice, it's one of the longer pieces we'll read this term. This fairly substantial piece he writes on tiny scraps of newspaper and smuggles it out. Excuse me. It's first given to the New York Times without even King's consent. A bunch of it is published in the New York Times Magazine, and then a number of African American magazines before its full text is printed in the Atlantic Monthly and later in King's own book. King lives 5 years after this. He's assassinated in 1968 in Memphis, later on in this struggle. But this, other than I Have a Dream speech, this is perhaps his most famous text. Um, I included the other text. I thought it was important to include the text he's responding to, which is a call for unity, because the form of this letter, I would really call it an essay, an argumentative essay. The form of this essay is based on counter arguments to the call for unity. So this call for unity was issued by the white clergy, and it basically said a few different things about King. Let's see. It said that it made four main points. One, that he was an outside agitator, an outsider who was coming in and stirring up stuff he didn't understand. He wasn't from Memphis. He didn't deserve to. They thought he did not have the local ties that he would need in order to effectively take part in that debate in Memphis. They also argued that he was causing tension in the town between black and white and other factions in the town that could lead to violence. They said it's not time yet, and the time was not ripe for civil rights, for full equality and civil rights. They needed to wait and be patient. And finally, that it was against the law what he was doing. That even if it was a hastily passed political law that was specifically targeted at King to make sure that he could be jailed if they did their planned march, still it was the law and he should obey it. So that was sort of their 4 points. And as we read over King's response, we see that his entire structure of this very memorable response is counter arguments, as in countering their arguments and saying why he is acting the way he is and why actually he has the moral and reasonable stance opposed to them. Okay, so mostly he's arguing for nonviolent resistance or civil disobedience and saying it's actually a moral imperative to break the law if the law is unjust. But he's also arguing for equality and some of the more familiar parts of King's repertoire about a future in which segregation won't exist and there will be equality of opportunity, if not necessarily true equality in society. Okay, so I wanted to read one short passage from King. I mean, I think that there is some great artistic oratory in this, and that's oratory is not the right word, but when you read King, you can't help but hear his voice. Maybe from the "I Have a Dream" speech or whatever you've heard from him. So it almost reads like an oratory when in fact it's a written text. I did want to read one this is his response. One passage. This is his response to the clergy's demand that they wait and be patient and wait until the time is ripe in order to try to get more rights and try to get equality. Here's how he says it. Perhaps it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, and even kill your black brothers and sisters, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she can't go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see ominous clouds of inferiority beginning to form in her little mental sky, and see her beginning to distort her personality by developing an unconscious bitterness toward white people. When you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son who is asking, Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean? When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When you are humiliated day in and day out by nagging signs reading white and colored, when your first name becomes nigger, your middle name becomes boy, however old you are, and your last name becomes John, and your wife and mother are never given the respected title Mrs. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro, living constantly at tiptoe stance, never quite knowing what to expect next, and are plagued with inner fears and outer resentments, when you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. There comes a time when the cup of endurance runs over, and men are no longer willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair. I hope, sirs, you can understand our legitimate and unavoidable impatience. So that one sentence I read you in there, starting with, but when you have vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers, the whole rest of that is one sentence. So we certainly do see that King was not just a political leader, but also an artist who is using this as a sort of preacher-type narrative persona and who builds up to this crescendo of a just massive and highly famous now crescendo of oratory here, culminating in, or not culminating, but listing and making the case for all the reasons that at the time they could not wait. They could not wait until the time was ripe as the clergy. They could not wait until the laws were changed so they wouldn't break them. And they couldn't wait for insiders to do all this, that outsiders had to be a part of it. So I wanted you to see King's article as an argument that takes on the structure of counter-argument to this other statement, which he sort of sees as summing up the people defending the status quo and their main points. And he's making the argument that is not succinct. He is using ethos here, moral, that there is a moral imperative to act. He's using reason and showing the differences in treatment of white and black people, so logos. He's also using pathos and passion and talking about what it's like to watch his daughter slowly change, from an innocent and colorblind little girl into one who has bitterness and confusion about her place in society. So we see the three main modes of rhetorical appeal, which are logos, pathos, and ethos, logic, passion, and ethics or morality. And we see how he uses counter-argument. We see how he uses great flights of rhetoric, and then a much more prosaic, humdrum style at other points. So look through this and try to read it as argument and judge it as such. How strong of an argument does he make? And, do you think that this lives up to its reputation as one of the essential documents of the civil rights era? Please do write about it on the blogs. I think there's a lot to write about in this one, of course. And take that quiz when you get a chance today before tonight. Okay. That's it for today. Thanks for listening. We have 2 more of these videos next week, and then your final paper is due on Wednesday. So I look forward to seeing those as well and to hearing any of your questions you have on them. Thanks a lot. Have a great day and great weekend.